My project for this week is getting as comfortable as I can riding motorcycles.
I was maybe 20 feet away from our campsite and I crashed. That was definitely not the original goal.
I have some experience. I don't have a ton. I'd say my strengths for this project are I have my motorcycle license. I took the 2.5-hour Harley-Davidson course, but the course you don't actually ever leave the parking lot. So I did do 2.5 days, but a day of that was in class, just learning mechanics and road safety and things like that. And then the next day, you barely move. You mostly learn how to start the bike, how to move the clutch, how to balance and turn and things like that. I haven't by myself gone on the railroad, and it has been a dream after watching the Long Way Round documentaries to do a long distance cross country. I would love to do something in foreign countries or multi-state, but to do that, I have to be comfortable on the road, and I'm not yet comfortable on the road. So that's my goal for this week. Coming into it, other than getting my license and taking the motorcycle course, I did spend about 6 weeks in Costa Rica in a really small town that most of the people there rode motorcycles. So there wasn't much traffic, there wasn't really other cars to worry about. So I got maybe a total of 6 hours of practice in Costa Rica. And some of that was with Braden. We rode together. Sometimes he was driving, sometimes I was driving, but that was 4 years ago. I'd say over the last 4 years, I have maybe 10 hours of practice being on a bike, but most of that, I don't think I've ever done more than 2 hours at a time on the bike, and most of the time that's not by myself either. It's with Braden, and so sometimes he's doing the driving and I'm riding on the back. So I've done maybe 10 hours over the last 4 years in small increments. And so it feels like every time I ride again, I'm relearning what I had already learned. And that's part of why I want to do 5 days of doing as much as I can and making as much progress as possible. So those are my strengths coming into it, aside from having a motorcycle and having the needed safety equipment to do this. I'd say my weaknesses coming into it are I definitely overthink and I am overly cautious in a way that makes me lose my balance and actually be more dangerous. I shy away from going too fast. I brake too easily and I make it harder on myself. But we were talking about it last night and compared it to doing a backflip. Like if you do 50% of a backflip or 10% of a backflip, it's way worse than fully committing and trying to do the whole thing. That's part of what I keep doing with motorcycles is I lean so far cautious that I'm actually more dangerous. It would feel more comfortable to be going 25 miles an hour, but if I'm on the highway, that's significantly more dangerous than going 65 and doing the speed limit. That's my biggest problem I want to tackle is feeling comfortable leaning into the risk of it and accepting that there will be risk and going anyway. My other concerns are the bikes that I've ridden in the past are quite a bit lighter than the bike that I have now. So this is Braden's bike and this is my bike. And my bike, I would guess, is at least an extra 100 pounds than my last one. Just the overall weight of that, like you feel it when you're balancing. It's a pretty physical exercise to maneuver rocks and potholes and mud and things like that. So the heavier the bike, the more difficult it is. And I don't quite feel equipped to use this bike comfortably yet, but that's another goal that I have for this week. And then I'm also definitely worried about ankle mobility because you control the clutch with your foot. But if you want to have good protection, you have limited mobility with your foot. The better the protection you have, the harder it is to feel the clutch and therefore to control it. That's an area that I really want to improve and feel really comfortable with, but I'm not there yet. My main goals are to feel street ready and to feel like I could start to do long distance trips with only the motorcycles, and I want to feel like I have good ankle mobility and to lean more into going faster and to not let being cautious turn into overly cautious and cause risks from that. That's where I'm coming from for this week. It's day one. We're gonna do 2 days in Sedona doing their back roads, and we're gonna camp there and get as much time as we can on all types of terrain. Yeah, this is day one of motorcycles.
So to start my practice off, we decided to go to Sedona for the weekend and test out some of their dirt roads. So we loaded up the bikes, headed over, and found a campsite. Fun fact, you cannot actually park and camp anywhere in Sedona anymore. You have to park in designated camp spots. You used to be able to camp wherever. We found a camp spot, set everything up, unloaded the bikes, and did about an hour and a half of trails. We started out on the dirt roads, and we didn't start as far in to the trail as it goes. We camped maybe halfway and started farther down that road. The farther you go down, the less traveled it is, so the bumpier the road gets, which is actually great for practice because it was maybe 30 minutes farther down the road. And it starts off a lot smoother. There's a lot of ATVs and Razors and Jeeps and all kinds of things that take the trails. So the road starts off smoother. So we took that for a while. I got some practice on some sand and light rocks and avoiding ditches and other small vehicles. And as you go, it gets more aggressive, more bumpy, and actually ends in a much more aggressive trail. There was like an entrance to a more official trail. We got to that and took a look at it, and it just was more aggressive than we wanted to take the bikes on. We turned around and went back down the road and actually ended up on the highway, or not the highway, but we ended up on an actual paved road, which there were a bunch of cars pulled over for people to do hikes and trails and whatnot. So I actually got some light road practice, which I haven't got very much of in the US. And yeah, I capped out at maybe 30 miles an hour, which for me was pushing my comfort zone, which sounds so silly because we're used to driving so much faster in a car. But when you're on a motorcycle, it feels infinitely faster. At least to me, it feels so much faster to be on the open wind and to be that close to the road, to have nothing separating you. So going 30 miles an hour actually feels pretty fast. I still feel very nervous about going on actual highways, going 65 or 75 miles an hour. So this was actually good middle ground for that. We hit maybe 30 miles an hour on this paved road. It looked like it was going to turn into the actual freeway. So we turned around. I tipped the bike over. We tipped it back up and made a U-turn on that road and just explored some of the other off-roads, and then ended up back on the original dirt road that we were on. Took it for maybe another 45 minutes, and we were absolutely starving. So we turned around and headed back to our campsite. The campsite that we picked also has a pretty tight turn into it. Was really good practice for me and was definitely pushing me. But I did not make the turn on the way in and went straight through a ditch, and I didn't tip the bike over and I didn't crash, but Braden did have to get me out of it. So we had lunch, enjoyed the sunset, and packed back up, and both jumped on one bike to go into town, into actual downtown Sedona. We didn't have much of a plan. We just wanted to explore and see, maybe get a snack or whatever. Today we got ready in the morning, got all packed up, both got on the bike, and had a couple errands to run in town. So went into town, which is maybe like a 20 to 30 minute ride, most of which is just getting out of our campsite or like off the Forest Service roads we were on. We did our errands, came back, and loaded up the bikes, got all ready, and had planned to do at least a couple hours. And we said maybe 1 to 2 hours on the dirt road, and then we would come back. We'd come back home and practice on the main roads by our apartment. Not 3 minutes in to practicing, I was maybe 20 feet away from our campsite, and I crashed. And I crashed bad enough, we called it good for the day. Braden was very entertained with my crash path. On impact, I felt like I had maybe broken something. I couldn't tell, but within a minute, it was clear to me nothing was broken, but I've got probably some bruising of the bone, just a lot of soreness. What I hit was my left hand, which controls the clutch, and my right foot, which controls the brake. Both things are very important, especially when off-roading and being on dirt roads. It hurt the most on my hand when I clenched, which is also super important for the clutch. And on my foot, I hit the bottom of my heel, which is super inconvenient. I felt a little uncomfortable about continuing to practice for the day, at least, which was definitely a bummer. I'm still really excited to keep going. And although I dropped the bike a couple times and I crashed once and got banged up a little bit, to me, this is not a deal breaker. I think it's very much a part of the learning experience and also risks that I knew going into it. If anything, it makes me just want to be safer and to be more skilled and to be able to do this. And that will come with time. I just am not there yet. So that's where I'm at for now. This is what 2 hours got me.
That was definitely not the original goal, but definitely a legitimate risk I knew going into it, and I'll have no permanent injuries or consequences. I might have to postpone the rest of hitting my goal was to hit 20 hours of competency, or 20 hours put in to see if I'd be ready. I'm definitely not comfortable enough to be on main roads and all of that. Got Braden picking me up. But this is still something I want to get good at, and I think it's going to take way more time than I had previously anticipated. So I'm probably going to postpone, but this is not the end.